This is Things Police See, First-Hand Accounts, with your host, Steve Gould.
Hey guys, welcome to the podcast that interviews active and retired police officers about their most intense, bizarre, and sometimes humorous moments on the job. I'm your host, Steve Gould. Thank you for joining us, everybody. Let's see here. Thank you for the reviews. I really appreciate it. We're getting close, dangerously close to 1,000. I think we have 760 or 7. I don't remember quite, but in the mid 700s, 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts, which is really awesome. And thank you for the new Patreon members. I will be doing Patreon shoutouts to the Patreon sergeants. If you really, really love the show and you want to show your support, you can go on Patreon and pick from 2 different levels, patrolman or sergeant. They come with different bonuses for supporting me financially. And Patreon itself, the platform, is like a Facebook page. You can kind of scroll through, and I do posts on there, early releases, video releases of the episodes. You can directly message me. I'll send you a TPS vinyl sticker and all that good stuff. So if you love the show and you want to show your support, that's the best way to do it. The link will be in the show notes. What else can I tell you? Yeah, we got a great episode for today. This guy's done a lot. He's a best-selling author. He worked narcotics, violent crimes, criminal intelligence, hostage rescue, SWAT, and internal affairs with many other specialties. He was in law enforcement for a total of 31 years. He worked both San Bernardino County, Los Angeles County. He worked for a brief time at Ontario Police Department, my place I used to live, and he also was a special agent for a time for Hawaii, which I don't even know what that is, but we're going to hear about it. His latest book, he's best-selling author for the Bruno Johnson series, with the latest book being The Sinister. Please welcome David Putnam.
Hey.
What's going on, brother?
Hey, thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. So, quick question for you up front. Which is better, San Bernardino or Los Angeles County?
Oh, they had positive points for both. I had the time of my life in L.A. County because I worked central Los Angeles, and every night it was cowboys and Indians. It was you never got a break to breathe.
Super busy.
Yeah.
When I lived in the high desert, my neighbor was a deputy sheriff for San Bernardino County. He worked the drug task force, and then he got back in uniform, worked for the coroner or something like that. But I thought it was interesting because he was kind of a country guy, and he said the favorite sheriff in that county has to be a cowboy.
Right.
Which I
That's
thought
true. Still a cowboy county. Yeah.
Yeah, which I thought was so cool for a Massachusetts guy. That was so cool because you naturally think when you hear deputy sheriff, you think the old West shootouts, the sheriff's new sheriff in town type of deal. But he said they like their current sheriff because he rode horseback, wore the hat, and he was like their kind of sheriff.
Yeah. When I went to San Bernardino County Sheriff's, I worked the High Desert Patrol for 2 years, I think. So I was working Phelan area and El Mirage and Summit Valley and all that area.
There's not a whole lot of deputies up there. I'd only ever see 1 or 2 roaming around. So that's a pretty big area. It's actually a lot of people too.
Yeah, San Bernardino County is 20,000 square miles. It's the largest county in the continental United States.
Wow.
So we run a SWAT team. Sometimes we'd get paged out to a SWAT call. We wouldn't get the address. They'd just page us to the airport, and we'd take our gear and get on the helicopter, and he'd fly us to the SWAT call.
That's crazy. It is huge out there. It's big country. Right. That's the coolest part about the high desert. Nobody tells you that when you move to Los Angeles area that there are legit snow-capped mountains. It's really neat.
Yeah, it was a fun job. I spent 22 years there.
And you retired as sergeant there, right?
Yeah, a sergeant in internal affairs is my last assignment.
I've gone through this in my mind before, and I know there's a simple answer, but when you be deputy sheriff, there's a lot of titles involved when you work at the sheriff's department. When you make rank, do they call you deputy sergeant, or do they call you just sergeant, then your last name?
You just call you sergeant, yeah.
Because it's with the state police, they're called troopers, but then when you make sergeant, they just call you state police sergeant. So with the deputy sheriff...
Yeah, there's deputy 1, deputy 2, and then there's a 2-striper, which has corporal or detective. So you can be either one, and it would signify on your badge. So a detective works plain clothes, but he has a little scroll on his badge that says detective. And then when he goes to uniform, he still uses that detective badge, and he still has the 2 stripes on his uniform.
So when you write, like in your report, when you're writing, naming yourself, what's your title like in print as a sergeant?
It would just be SGT period Putnam, and then my ID number.
Okay, so you don't put deputy sheriff in there or sheriff or any of that stuff?
No.
All right. That was a major issue I was having. Thank you for straightening it out. How'd you get into becoming a best-selling author? Have you always been into writing, or?
Yeah, well, I was always an avid reader. I mean, I read everything from a very young age. I mean, I read I was always read out of my age group, in fact. So once I became enamored in law enforcement, they paid me to carry a gun, drive fast, and chase bad guys. But then when I went to work in narcotics and work in surveillance, I kept novels in the backseat of my car. So it's not like in the movies where everybody's on a surveillance, everybody's watching in one location. When you're on surveillance, one guy watches and the rest of the team lays off somewhere in a parking lot, school parking lot, grocery store parking lot. Some people played softball. I read novels. So now I got to read when I wanted to, or when I was on surveillance, and still do the job that I loved. So I was on a surveillance in Mojave Desert in Lucerne Valley, and it was on a meth lab. And I was down to my last book in my back seat, and it was the second sophomore effort of this author. His first book was an international bestseller. It was a crazy great book, and so I thought this is going to be a good book because I was still new to the writing. I didn't understand it. What happens when you write a great book, it might take you 10 years to write it. Then you sell that book, you have 1 year to write the second book. Wow. So the sophomore effort of this guy, it was just a dog. The book was just horrible. But I was a captive audience because I was on this surveillance. So I read the whole book all the way through, and I thought, I could do better. And I wrote my first 4 novels in the front seat of my undercover car. Each book was 4 legal pads long. Then I went to a writing conference to meet agents and editors, and I realized that a good a good author makes it look easy, and it was very difficult. Like I told you earlier, I was on I wrote my 38th manuscript before I sold my first book, which was number 36. And so right now I think I'm on manuscript 63 or 64.
And are you able to go back and revamp any of the old manuscripts, or were they?
Not really, because your craft level continues to evolve, and there's so many different layers of the writing, like the structure and the voice, and you would have to rewrite the entire book. And I have so many ideas right now that I'm never going to finish writing them. I don't want to go back and revisit something I've already done. Yeah,
and it probably feels very sophomoric, the older ones, now that you've become a master at your skill. So what is good advice for, like, a lot of cops have that compulsion that they want to write a book because inherently the nature of police work is you're going to have a lot of stories. That makes my podcast tick. You can just interview
right.
Any patrolman who's worked for 20 years is going to have like insane things to say.
Right.
What's a good throttle to put on somebody to make sure that they're putting out a good product, so they don't just like go ahead and self-publish like in like 6 months? You know what I mean?
Yeah, you need to talk to somebody who's in the industry and get slapped down a few times before you submit to anybody, and even to self-publish, because you're not going to sell any books if you don't follow some precepts. I actually teach a class on how to write a novel, and it's I call it Writing by the Numbers, and there's 16 precepts that you follow. But the most important thing for a new author is to write for the emotion. And that's what people miss. There's motivation, action, reaction in every scene. And the number one part you want to look at is the R, the reaction. The motivation's important, the action's important, but the R is the most important because people are reading for that emotion. And what happens so often with new authors, especially coppers, they write the action thinking that that's going to pull the reader in. And it can, but you got to have the motivation to set it up. You got to have the action, which should be the smaller portion of it, and then the reaction.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that's even like when someone tells someone comes on podcast and they tell a story. Luckily, most coppers are innately good storytellers because we get good at just telling each other stories. You do once in a while. I will get somebody who just isn't. So they tell you all the action in a story that they should be able to draw the story up for 10, 15 minutes, and they tell it in like 2 minutes, and I go,
right.
This happened. But yeah, what was like? How did it affect you? How did it affect that person? What was, what was the emotion involved with any of that? So I can definitely see how that translates. David, can you take us back to when you were a young officer or deputy, to your first hot call, the first time you really got your blood pumping, your adrenaline pumping, rather?
Yeah. I've been retired now for a while, and I did 31 years. But I had a lot of action in my first year on the job, mostly because I went out looking for it, because I wanted the action. But
you're like, I got a bunch of books to write later. I got to check this out.
I wasn't thinking about that at the time. I'd have to say that the one that stands out in my mind the most was my first officer-involved shooting. And that was 1980, I think, or 81. I can't remember the year now. But I was brand new. I was just off of training, and I started chasing violence. I just loved to chase the violent criminals, and that came from my first armed robbery that I went to and took a report from this woman who was just almost scared to death from having a gun put in her face.
I bet.
And I wanted to chase those people that caused that. And so as a patrol officer, I actually did a detective's job. I'd pull the reports of other coppers' robberies, and I had a pin map, and I was doing my own follow-ups trying to catch these armed robbers. And I was doing pretty well at it as a patrol officer. I think I was on my number 12th one when I worked for Ontario, and I was making $600 a month straight time. There was no overtime at the time. They were being crooked.
Rough.
So I had to pay for my own apartment, my insurance, my car. So at lunch, I would go home and I would make macaroni and cheese and hot dogs for lunch.
Classic,
right? Because I couldn't afford it. So this call comes out, armed robbery, and it happened to be at the Market Basket at 4th and Mountain, and that was the Market Basket that I shopped at with my mom. That's where we did all our shopping. I knew the area, I knew the people, and so I cleared my lunch and started responding. And the dispatcher says, responding units, be advised that the suspects are two white males wearing denim jackets, armed with handguns, and are running eastbound from the location, and the Box Boys are chasing them. So I asked the dispatcher, I said, well, are the Box Boys armed? And this is why I'm responding. I'm going up this one street, San Antonio. You probably know San Antonio.
Yeah.
Stop signs.
Absolutely.
I'm blowing all the stop signs going up San Antonio. And she finally figures it out too. Like, no, the Box Boys aren't armed. So I drive up San Antonio and I cut across toward Mountain. And I know that there's 4 or 5 streets that run perpendicular to Mountain, and that the suspects have to be on one of those streets. So I just randomly pick one, and I don't know. I think it was Rosewood. And as I come down the street, now I'm very young and have no experience at all. And there's a car blocking the street, middle of the street, and there's a guy standing outside the car door, and he's pointing. So I get on the radio and I advise dispatch that I'm in foot pursuit of an armed suspect, because I haven't seen him yet, but I know I'm going to be chasing him. And as it turns out, the sergeant who was responding was setting up a perimeter, and he stepped on my radio transmission. So nobody knew where I was. Nobody caught the call.
Whoops.
What I was doing. Yeah, so I was on my own. So I run to the front of this house, and this old man comes out the front door, and he says, he's in my backyard. So I said, can I go through your house? And he goes, yeah. And he turns around real slow, and it might not have been slow, but I was so pumped up on adrenaline that I run to the side of his fence, and I vault the fence. As I come down into his backyard, his dog attacks me because I'm an intruder. So I kick it off. He calls the dog off, and I run to the fence, and I hear the guy yard jumping. He's going over fences now. So I start yard jumping. I'm chasing the sound. I'm not chasing him yet.
Right.
And I quit hearing the sound, so I do a quick peek over the fence. I move position. I do another quick peek. I jump over the fence. And this is at dusk, very low light. And so I'm looking around in the yard with my gun, and because I think he's going to lay in wait and ambush me. And I look up, And through the sliding glass door, a white male was inside the house. He's wearing a denim jacket, and he's got a kid in a headlock, and he's got a gun to his head.
Oh, my goodness.
He's yelling, you quit chasing me, I'm going to kill the kid. Now, the academy class was huge. I went through, there was 110 deputies that went through. We graduated 52, I think, because of the attrition rate is huge. I was number 2 in the academy for marksmanship. I had every confidence in my ability of hitting this guy. But what stopped me was it sheer glass or was it safety glass? Because back then, there was still a lot of that sheer glass, and it would deflect around for sure.
Right.
And I also give a talk on the anatomy of violence and what it takes to shoot somebody. And I go through the 7 levels of force and the use of force continuum. And at that time, I had the legal right, I had the moral right, but I didn't have the emotional ability to pull the trigger. So I yell at him, drop the kid or I'm going to shoot you. I start taking aim. I start lining up my sights on the guy, and that's when I start thinking about the glass. He sees I'm going to shoot him. He pushes the kid down, and he runs to the front door. So I run to the side of the house, and I vault the fence. And as I'm going over the fence, I hear people in the street yelling, there he is, get him, get him. And as I come into the front yard, off to my right, the box boys from Market Basket in the red smock.
Yeah, they're still in it.
They're still in it. They're running down the street, right? And this guy has a chrome 38. It's very visible, plain, easy to see. He's running across the front yards, and he's yelling, I'm going to kill you. You keep chasing me, I'm going to kill you. So now I'm running across the front yards, and the box boys are behind me coming up about half a block back. So as I start gaining on him, he cuts between the houses, and he's going to go over another fence back into the backyards. And I think he's going to once he gets there, he's going to have the advantage, and he's going to snipe me. So I stop at the sidewalk. I yell, stop! I'm going to shoot. And I still had those 3 things: legal right, moral right, but I did not have the emotional ability to pull the trigger. So the crook went up on the fence. I yelled, stop, last chance, because I did not want to shoot him. I actually subconsciously, because I'd shot so much, I automatically pulled back to single action on the revolver because I knew it was a technical shot because the low light was moving, and it was a long distance for a pistol shot. I was shooting a Model 15 Combat Masterpiece Smith & Wesson. It was a 4-inch barrel. So he kept going. I fired. I just tapped the trigger, and the gun popped. And then I heard the box boys go, oh, shit, and they start running the other way because now they just got real for him. And the crook goes up in the air, flips around, and lands on his back on a cedar plank gate. And he's teetering there with a gun in his hand. And so he's yelling, oh, my God, you shot me, you shot me. And I start moving up on him, and I'm yelling, drop the gun, because I can see it. It's a chrome 38. And he won't drop the gun. So I stop, and I say, drop the gun, I'm going to shoot you. And he realizes that he's about to get shot. He looks at the gun like, oh, he just realizes that, oh, that's what you're talking about. He throws the gun down, and when he does, he flips over the fence on the other side out of view. So now I run up, and I do a quick peek, and he had the grocery bag of money in his jacket, and when he hit, the money fluffed out and was on the sidewalk, the patio, and there was this huge widening puddle of blood underneath him. And so I can't see his hand, and I said, show me your hand. I'm up on the fence looking down on him. Show me your hand. He won't show me. He goes, help me, I'm shot. So I get up on the fence, and I knee drop him, and I break his hip and his leg when I land on him. And I get him handcuffed. He's yelling, don't handcuff me. So I get him handcuffed. I go to the window, the sliding glass door of the house, and there's a woman in her robe, her night robe, and it's just getting dark. So she kind of is going to bed early. And I yell, call the police, because I don't know where I am. I call for help on the radio, and they say, where are you? And I had no idea what the address was. So I yell for her to call the police. She runs and hides in her bedroom, closes the door, and she doesn't call the police.
Thanks a lot.
Well, this incident helped me later on as far as experience, because I had another similar incident in South Central Los Angeles where I chased a guy, and I just commandeered the house because I was deep in the bad area. So I go back, and they put an officer on each corner of the street and walk them down yelling my name. That's how they found me. And the guy that found me was a guy named Art Bills. He was like my mentor. He had this big gray and black afro, a big black handlebar mustache, wore glasses. Nice. He was 6'3", 250 pounds, and he was a power lifter and a black belt in karate. This guy was the baddest guy I had ever. Yeah, he was. So he comes up. He's the one that was on my street. He yells my name. I yell back. He comes up and he peeks over the fence. I can see his glasses. He always had a cigar. His hands come up on that plank fence. He sees me, and he just pushes the whole gate. He doesn't open it. He doesn't try. He just pushes the whole fence down and walks over it. He comes over, nice. And he sees the crook who's laying there dying, and he gets down on one knee and grabs him by the hair, and he picks his head up and goes, "Goodbye, asshole," like that. The guy. Then Art Bills comes over, and he has a cigar. He's holding a cigar. He shakes my hand. He goes, good job," like that. He had a real raspy voice. But the bullet, I was shooting a 128 grain semi-jacketed hollow point, and it hit him just below the tailbone, and it went right through his prostate, upper and lower intestine, and lodged up in his chest. Wow. So it just hit him, just mainlined him. The paramedics got there and put a trauma suit on him and rushed him to the hospital. And there's a lot more to the end of the story too. So because I was because he was so critical, they couldn't take him to county. They took him to Loma Linda, a closer hospital.
Oh, that's where my son was born.
Yeah. So Loma Linda, they took him to ER, and they treated him, and they saved his life. And he had 4 balloons of heroin up his rectum. And the doctor said, "I just missed it. If he would have hit those balloons, it would have been poetic justice. He would have died of an overdose of the heroin."
Wow.
So as it turns out, this guy's name was Jerry Harmon. He and his buddy Lonnie Rose were doing serial robberies, and they had robbed a pharmacy that day and a farmer's market, which I didn't know about at the time. But the pharmacy had been robbed a number of times, and he had this 12-gauge pump shotgun under the counter. So these 2 guys come in and rob him this time, and he gives them the money, and they're running out of the store. He pulls the shotgun up, racks it, fires, blows a display up in his mist, blows a display up in his store,
like a movie.
Fires a second time, blows the front window out of us. Missed both times. The crook turns around, levels the gun, one shot, hits him center mass, and drops the pharmacist. And as it turns out, the pharmacist's daughter was a nurse at Loma Linda Hospital.
Oh, weird.
Yeah. So he, in a court trial, he threatens to kill me when he gets out. And I told him that I said, well, I'll just listen for your wheelchair creeping up on me. So I transfer eventually to LA County Sheriff's, and this is about 4 years later. I get a subpoena for Stockton, California, and I don't recognize the name. And I call the district attorney, and it's for Jerry Harmon, the guy I shot. Well, he had done a bunch of serial robberies up in Stockton, and they were just now going to trial. So his defense was that he couldn't have done the robberies because he's in a wheelchair. So they wanted me to come up and say that he was walking and talking when I shot him. So I flew up there. I went to the district attorney's office. I sat there. They went and told him that I was there to testify. The guy pled guilty, so I never got to testify.
Oh, weird. Was he just trying to waste your time?
No, he was trying to force the hand of the DA. They didn't know they were going to be able to get me to come up there and testify to the robberies that I got him on.
Wow, that's a wild story. That's your first year in the job?
Yeah, my first year, yeah.
Wow.
There was a couple. I just wrote a book called The Fearsome Moonlight Black. Just came out October 18th, and that is my first year as a copper. I wrote it as a memoir. I couldn't get it to work, so the first half of the book is real life memoir. And I put that story in there, and I put in a couple other things, like a murder and a suicide and some really wild stuff that happened to me when I was brand new. And so that book just came out, and it's doing really well as well too.
That's awesome. We'll put a link in the show notes. Make sure people can get to it. So what changed when you were on the street and you put the gun into, single action and you actually fired the round? What changed between then and before? You know, you said like emotionally you weren't there. Did you feel like this is my only shot? I got to do it.
Yeah, I was forced to do it. People say that when I say I didn't have the emotional ability to do it, it was my training that kicked in, I think. Because in the academy, it's a very tough academy. San Bernardino County Sheriff's Academy
I've heard that.
And like I said, the washout rate is huge. So they drill it into you. And I was glad once I made a decision that it was not a conscious effort. The gun in my hands and my eyes did everything once I made that choice. So, I didn't want to chase the guy over another fence because I know he's going to kill me. This was my last chance to take him out. And that's what got me, I think, ultimately to pull the trigger.
Yeah, especially now knowing his backstory, he definitely would not have had a problem with blasting you just so he could get away.
Exactly. Yeah.
Dang, man, that's intense.
I was in some wild ones in L.A. This one is nothing. It's minor compared to some of the ones in.
Oh, lay it on me, David.
Oh, how much time you got? Okay, another one. Shoot, there was two that were just really crazy. Yeah. I did 4 years on the street. I was in a shooting. I did a bunch of great stuff, wild stuff in Ontario. I get to LA. They put me on training again for 6 months with that FTO.
Holy cow.
And when I get there, when I apply for LA, I go to LA, they put me back into jail, which I thought I could handle this. I want to work in South Central Los Angeles. I want all the action. And I get to the jail the first night. It was like, oh, this is a big mistake.
Jails suck.
It's like a concrete cave with all these crooks in there, and you're locked in there with them with no weapons. So I put in for my transfer right away. I asked around, what's the hottest place in L.A.? And they said Linwood. So I put in for Linwood. And that night, the sergeant came to me and said, hey, I know you're new, but you don't want to put in for Linwood. And I said, why? Is it the hottest place in the county? He says, yeah, but there's nobody in the list. They're ordering people to go. They can't get people to go to the station. I said, well, I'm going. So instead of doing 3 to 5 years, I did 6 months. It was less than 6 months, like 5 and some change. And I went down to Linwood. They put me on training. They were having a problem at Imperial and Mona at this gas station. It was robbed. People were robbed in there 56 times in 2 months. Wow. So they thought they would put a surveillance up on it. And it's at the corner, right? The escape route to this alley is right into Imperial Courts projects. So once they get in that alley, there's no catching them at all. So they put me in a car with another training officer on overtime. And they had the sergeant up in a building with a high-speed camera because it was before video was real popular. This would be 1983, 84, probably 84. And they put a car down Imperial. They put a van in a parking in a dirt field above the gas station on the other side of the alley. And so the sergeant was going to call the robbery out. This robbery's going down. The car was supposed to roll in westbound. We're supposed to roll up Mona and block the alley and cut the access off from them running to the fence to the Imperial Courts. We're uniform, marked black and white. So as soon as we set up, the two crooks come and they have masks and they have guns and they hide them under this bush by this fence. And the detective sergeant would say that he said it 3 times. I remember distinctly. Okay, get ready. They're masking up. They're getting their guns. It looks like it's going to be a white female and a blue Volvo on the southmost gas island, because people were driving back and forth from L.A. on Imperial Highway because it's the main route, and they're just stopping there to get gas because they think it's a regular gas station, but it's not. Yeah. So So 3 times he said, "Okay, never mind, cancel." They took their masks off. They didn't like what they saw or whatever. The 3rd time he says, "Okay, 211 in progress. Everybody roll in." And so we come hauling ass up Mona. We blow across the Imperial Highway. And as we come across the highway, there's a shootout going on in the gas station. And it's right there, and I flinch. I hold my arm up because it's bam, 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 bam. And we come into the alley because we're still going to do our position. We're going to take up our position, do our job. And we come in the alley, stop. Our headlights are pointed down the alley. The car doors I opened my car door. My training officer, who I think I had more time on the street than he did, he's left-handed. He gets out of the cop car, and his gun hits the door frame of the car, and he loses it. It goes off in the field. So he's on his hands and knees looking for his gun. As I'm looking over the door of my cop car, and out pops this hole in the fence, this crook that had just been involved in a big shootout in a gas station, and he's running right at me. So I come up to line up on him. I mean, it happens in a quick second, and the detective pops through. And I don't know where he came from, but I recognized him as this one detective, and he's in plain clothes, and he has a 12 gauge, and he's holding the trigger down, and he's racking a shotgun going bam, bam. And aiming at the crook is between me and the shotgun. So I dived down to the ground, and the pellets went over my head and peppered this big elephant leaf bush. There's pellets. If I would have been stayed standing, I would have been hit. So another crook pops through the fence and runs northbound, and there's a running gunfight chasing this guy up into these residential area. So what happened was the guys in the van, they got so pumped up because they could see the crooks arming themselves each time and then stop, and they were more adrenaline pumped than we were. Once the sergeant said, "It's a 211, move in," they left their position, which they weren't supposed to. They came through the fence, and they confronted the two suspects in the gas station. Well, as it turned out, the victim getting gas, he got shot by all the gunfire, and the crooks got away. Well, they didn't get away because when I dove down under the bushes, when the detective's firing the shotgun, racking it, holding the trigger down, racking the shotgun, he dropped the guy, hit him in both legs, and knocked his legs out from under him. And then the other guy got caught later on. The other shooting was when I went to street narcotics in L.A. and how to start. This is kind of this started with a search warrant. We did a search warrant. We get an anonymous informant say that heroin's being dropped off at 12 o'clock on Wednesday. So we set up on the house. And there's a little bit more to the story, but I got to abbreviate it. The car shows up. A person goes in. Comes out with a baggie. You can see the Ziploc baggie full of money. So we know the dope deal went down. We secured the house for a warrant. We assault the house, secure it. The guy pulls a shotgun on me, but he decides not to shoot. He throws a shotgun down along with a big handful of balloons of heroin. So we get the woman who dropped the heroin off, and we flip her. And so all she has is a phone number. So I write a search warrant on the phone number, and it comes back to Santa Ana in another county. So we write a search warrant on that location. Too. Yeah, and I write a search warrant on that, and we get one of our guys in uniform in a black and white, and we take 4 of our undercover cars down there. We drive down to Santa Ana. We leave one guy up in Norwalk with the informant in case, for some reason, the guy that's delivering the heroin gets away from us. He's the last stopgap to protect the witness, the woman that was flipped. So he's in a van in front of the suspect's house that we flipped, the woman. We set up on the house. We call him on the radios, tell her to make the phone call. She calls and orders up. As soon as he gets on the radio and says, "Okay, the order's in," this guy comes walking out of the house in Santa Ana, gets in his Monte Carlo, and we're following him. We're moving. It's a mobile surveillance. As soon as we know that he's going to get on the freeway and he's not going to go buy the heroin someplace else, the team leader calls, he says, take him down now. Well, the black and white was too far, so the crook gets on the freeway. We can't pull him over on the freeway because he'll toss the heroin out on the freeway before we pull him over.
Right.
So we got to follow.
It pays to paint with Lowe's. Pros can earn more faster by signing up for our MVP's Pro Rewards program. Get up to 20% back when you buy more paint, including top paint and stain brands pros trust, such as HGTV Home by Sherwin-Williams and Valspar. Visit us in-store or at Lowe's.com today to get started. Based on minimum qualifying annual spend, Lowe's gift card must be claimed by last day of calendar year. Valid through 12/31. Additional exclusions, terms, and conditions apply. See Lowe's.com/L/pro loyalty terms for details.
So we follow him, I was driving my own personal truck because there weren't enough undercover vehicles. And so I could actually get up next to this guy on the freeway and I could see him. He has no idea that we're all around him. There's 4 undercover cop cars all around him. He goes 91 to the 605 north. He gets off at Rosecrans, just like he's going to go. He's headed right toward our where Sanchez has the victim at the house. So we come up to, it's a T intersection. There's 2 lanes that go left. There's 1 lane that goes right. We come up, and the team leader says, "The fresh red, take him on the off ramp, take him now." So I'm the closest. I'm on my truck. I get out, and I have my gun out. I was carrying 3 guns. And I had the gun out, and I was running up on the car, and the team leader was short and squat, and he comes zipping by me. So I go between a citizen's car and the Chevy Monte Carlo, because I'm going to cover on the far side. He's going to take the guy on the driver's side. So as I'm passing between the car, the Chevy Monte Carlo, and he's knocking on the window with his gun, Manos arriba, Manos arriba. The crook looks up, and this is all happening at the same time, and he puts his hand on the steering column, puts it in reverse, and backs up. He's going to take my legs off. So I flip over on the hood of the car so I don't lose my legs, and he rams the car. He puts it in drive. He rams the car and had him. These were all civilians that aren't involved, and you don't even know what's going on. And the team leader, we're not supposed to have semi-automatic handguns. They weren't approved yet. But I was carrying one. Really? Yeah, I was carrying one that was my 3rd gun, it was my last ditch gun. That if I went through 2 of my handguns, 2 of my revolvers, and I had to go to my automatic, I didn't care what the policy was. You know what I mean? So,
right, yeah.
So this guy had never carried, he never shot an automatic, but he looked at it. He's my boss. He goes, "Man, I'm going to carry this." He takes it from me because that's just the way it was back in L.A. These guys had big egos. So this is it's the first night he grabs the gun from me. It's a Model 59 with an extended magazine. It's got 19 rounds in it. And when the guy rams and tries to take my legs off and he puts it in gear, rams the car ahead, I could see, if I was lying on the back of the hood of the car, that Bobby was trying to pull the trigger. He's pulling the trigger, but the gun wasn't firing. And then he settled down a little bit, realizes the safety. He flips the safety, and he just starts going. Bam, 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 bam. The other guys come running up, and they start firing on this guy. So it's like bam, 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 bam. The taillights go out. The trunk gets shot up. The back window gets shot out. 3 rounds go in the headrest. The speedometer gets shot out. Rounds skipped off the roof of the car, and all the citizens just take off. You know, there's just this Chevy Monte Carlo sitting there, and I can't see the crook, right? All the windows are shot out. The light changes green, and the crook, the car just kind of drifts off. It's on this T intersection, and it's headed right for the curb. It's going to go over the curb and into the front yard of this house, when all of a sudden the crook sits up, hits the gas, and takes off.
See you later, suckers.
Yeah. So I thought it was funny. I started laughing, running for my truck, and I jump in my truck, and I'm hauling ass. But this Monte Carlo was out running my truck. So I go to the emergency channel and advise of an officer-involved shooting, and I try to get Ray on the radio. Say he's coming your way, and we've just been involved in a shooting. And I can't pick him up on the radio. So I got my truck door open. Well, a foot on the door. I'm talking on the radio, and the team leader comes running up with the 9mm that I lent him, and he goes, "Man, did you see that? I was dialed in and all the way live." I said, "I would have killed the guy if your gun hadn't jammed." I go, "Give me that." I take the gun from him, and it didn't jam. It locked open because he fired all 19 rounds. He didn't even know it.
Yeah.
So we get on there. We get dispatched and tell them that because we did have a game plan with all the different contingencies with the hospitals and all that. So we had the address. I called dispatch and I said, "Send a unit code 3 to this address. We have a suspect who's armed and dangerous, and he's going to this house. And we have a deputy there. He's not answering the radio." So find out later that the sergeant from Norwalk Station, I guess he's closest. He's coming down the street blacked out, and he's responding to the call that we just put in while we're still racing to get there. He's coming down the street, and he's blacked out, and he sees these 2 Hispanic guys walking down the street carrying shotguns, and he thinks that they're narcs. So he goes, "Hey, what do you guys need?" And his Hispanics are citizens in the area who saw what was happening. So Ray is in the car. He's wearing his raid jacket, a green raid jacket. He sees the Monte Carlo pull up in the driveway, right? And he's sitting there talking to the girl, making time with his woman. And he sees, oh, man, those guys let the guy get through him. Now I got to make the arrest. This is what he says. So he gets out. He's smoking. He's a chain smoker, smoking a cigarette. Yeah. And the crook bails out of the Monte Carlo, and he takes a handful of heroin, balloons of heroin, throws it over the roof of the house into the backyard. And so Ray is waving his gun, get over here, get over, smoking a cigarette, put your hands on the car. Crook puts his hands on the car, and Wade walks up to handcuff him, and that's when his mind locks in, and he sees the car. It looks like a Bonnie and Clyde car. Yeah. And he goes, oh, he realizes he's in way over his head. So he pistol whips the guy to knock him down. The crook turns around and grabs Ray's gun, and they're fighting over the gun now. Oh. And Ray goes down on his back. The crook is standing over him, and he's trying to turn the gun around to shoot Ray. That's when the sergeant comes driving down the street, asks these two guys, hey, you guys need help or something? And then these two citizens that grabbed their guns because they saw what was happening said, no, but you better help that guy. So the sergeant comes running up. He can't see who's who. He yells, let go of the gun, because he doesn't know who's a good guy, who's a bad guy. Yeah. So he just takes his python, a 6-inch python, and he just wraps the bad guy across the back of the head and knocks him out. So, damn. So then we get everything settled down, and the lieutenant shows up. The lieutenant from narcotics shows up, and I was standing there, and the car shot to shit, and I could see the look on his face when he pulls up because it was just classic. He could not believe what he was seeing. So my sergeant says, go back to this 605 and try to find some witnesses to what happened over there, to the shooting. So I get back in my truck, I drive over there, and I go door to door knocking because nobody stuck around. There's glass and shell casings all over this intersection, right? And so I go knocking door to door, and I finally find somebody. I said, hey, did you see what happened? And this lady says, yeah, I was getting off the freeway, but I thought you guys were making a movie.
That's so LA.
Yeah. And so other cars got hit from all the gunfire, but nobody called in. We didn't have one witness at the scene. Nobody called it. I guess they just thought, yeah, that's LA.
Yeah. Well, that's unbelievable, Dave, because around here, if you light off an M80, you got 30 calls about there's been a shooting. It's somebody with a firework.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
That's insane. That drug task force work in Southern California is, I've talked to a few of you guys, and it's like, it's nuts.
Yeah. That's really some wild times.
That's really cool. I have a question about your most intense or terrifying call, but it's probably just, was that it, or do you go, what's going on?
No, there was other shootings like that one. There was some crazy times there. I was jumped by 5 guys. I was jumped by 5 guys once. I was jumped by 6 guys once. The worst fight that I was ever in. I took hostages one time. I commandeered 2 cars. I commandeered a house. All because I went after the most violent people. I would chase them. And doing that, I would get myself in over my head a number of times. But the worst fight I was in was the one guy that attacked me in Watts. I was talking to 4 or 5 hypes. I had their hands on the car, and I was examining them. Who was going to take the jail for any influence? And this big, huge black guy comes running up the street, no shirt on, windmilling his arms. I'm going to kill you, you mother. And I look around, and it's got to be me. So I tell the crooks to go get out of here, and they take off running. And so I pull my PR-24. Now, I was training for the SWAT team. I was running 10 miles every other day. I was bench pressing 350 pounds. This guy was not going to be a threat to me. And he come in and telegraphed his punch, and I ducked under it, hit him with the baton, broke his ribs. I could feel the ribs breaking my baton. It's a takedown. They tell you in academy, you hit him like that, he's going to go down. Well, he didn't. He spun, came at me again. I hit him again on the ribs. I broke all the ribs on both sides of his chest, and he still kept coming. At one point, he spun and headbutted me, and I went down, and he's on my chest, and he's got his hands around my throat, and he's choking me. Damn. I kick him off, and I get on top of him. I pull my flashlight, and I'm hitting him as hard as I can on the face, and I broke the bones above his eyes, broke his nose. He kicks me off, and we're standing. I'm hitting him with the flashlight, and he's slugging me in the face. I hit him, and the blood was so thick on my flashlight, it was getting slick. I couldn't hold it.
Yeah.
I tore one boot off. It was just hanging because we were fighting on the foundations where the watch rides were. They tore my shirt down. I tore my badge off. My back pocket was. I tried to choke him out. He bit my arm. I had a big bite mark on my arm. It was just
damn.
And I bet you it was a 2-minute fight.
Yeah, it feels like forever.
I tell a deputy when I'm training him, I said, if you're in a fight for 60 seconds, your odds of winning seriously diminish. You got to break. You got to break contact and run. And that's what I tell him. And this guy, that's why I think it was only 2 minutes. But afterward, people asked me, why didn't you shoot him? I said, if I shot him, I thought I would just piss him off.
Yeah.
This guy, he was on PCP.
Oh, jeez.
PCP. So he was totally anesthetized. There was no pain threshold at all.
Yeah.
So I finally tackled him, and then backup got there. We got him, and it was really nice. The people in the neighborhood came up, and they respect the deputies. I don't know if anyway. They came up, picked my notebook up, picked my badge up, my pens, pencils, and they handed them to me. Thank you, deputy. We know you could have killed him. Thank you for not killing him.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's freaky. PCP's a hell of a drug, man. That stuff is, and it's been
back in the day.
Yeah. That's when they talk about one guy taking on, 10 cops, like trying to pig pile the guy, and he's throwing them around, and it got out of control on the East Coast. But what we heard was like, a guy in California threw a car.
Yeah.
But I didn't hear.
A friend of mine was in a shooting with a PCP guy with a knife, and they shot him 16 times, hit him all upper body hits, and he went down, got up, and took off running.
Yeah, that actually someone told a similar story. Maybe you know him. I'm talking about a Rob McCreary. He was a K-9 officer and a detective from Pomona. And he shot a guy like 5 or 6 times in the chest that was on PCP, and it just wasn't doing the trick.
That's scary. It's a scary feeling when you give them everything you have, and they just look at you like, "You got anything better?"
Yeah, I mean they drop dead, but it's like they have this delayed life force.
Exactly. Yeah. So the strangest one, because you had your letter, you want to know the strangest thing that ever happened to me.
Let it rip.
Because 31 years. Was out in the low desert, where it's you know the low desert. The French people from the urban areas, they want to get away from everybody.
That's no place for a ginger, David.
A ginger,
yeah, like a redhead, like me.
Oh, yeah. So there's some strange people out there that are hiding from society, and so some of the strangest things I've ever seen happen out there. And this was the strangest was Halloween one year. And I still have the call history in my posse box that I kept because it's hard to believe what happened. This guy was addicted to Soma, a muscle relaxer, and he was walking across his front yard on Halloween, and he had built up his tolerance because he'd been on it so long that his body decided to shut down, and he died right there in his front yard of an overdose of Soma. The people that are trick-or-treating think that he's a prop. A dead guy prop.
Oh, jeez.
You're stepping over him to get to the door.
Oh.
So along about midnight, his wife's a speed freak. She's got the front door open, watching a big screen television. She looks outside, and her husband fell out again. They call it DFO, done fell out. So she goes out, grabs him by the boot, and drags him into the house, banging his head and tears his shirt. Gets him in the house. And she feels him. Oh, he's cold. So she gets a thermometer, tries to stick it in his mouth, but he's got rigor mortis, and she can't open his jaw. So she flips him over, pulls his pants down, sticks the thermometer. Yes, pulls it out. Oh, he's cold. So she takes all his clothes off and gets a hairdryer, and she's trying to warm her husband up.
Oh my God!
So she sees it's a bad area. And the door's open. She sees this deputy driving real slow in his marked car. She goes running out, Deputy, my husband's sick. Come and help him. Deputy calls for medical aid. He comes running in, and there's a naked dead guy on his stomach with a thermometer sticking in his butt and a woman trying to warm him up with a hairdryer.
That's wild.
Yeah, that's a crazy one.
Yeah. That's the opposite of when dispatch sends you somewhere and it sounds super hot and you get there and it's nothing. This lady's just like, my husband's sick, and it's like a corpse with a thermometer sticking out of his butt. You're like,
He's sick, yeah.
That's wild. Yeah, tweakers are, they do stuff like that. They're very productive in like all kinds of bad ways.
Yes, they are. Yeah, that's true.
Oh, my goodness. David, do you have a heartwarming encounter, dare I ask you?
Yeah, I had a couple of life-saving awards. One was when I was working a SWAT team, there was a kid that was kidnapped in Highland, and we were pulled in because the kid just all of a sudden disappeared, and they thought that it might have been a kidnapping, and they wanted us in on the ground floor because we were specialized. So they page us out to this location. We get there, we get briefed, and the patrol officers are there, and they had already done the background. But I know, you being a sergeant, that when you take over a scene, you start from the beginning because you don't know what they miss, and you don't want to miss it.
Sure.
So on a missing persons, first thing you do is you search the house. And this is a toddler. This is a kid that's 3. No, he wasn't talking. So he was probably 2 years old. Maybe between 18 months and 2 years old. So we searched the house again, and the patrol deputies kind of got their nose out of joint because we already did that, but you don't want to get burned. Right. So they thought that we were the big dog coming in and Bigfooting them out of the way. So then we started expanding the search just like they did, and there's an abandoned house next door. So I go in this house with this other deputy, and we're searching this abandoned house. And the patrol said, no, we searched it. The parents searched it. He's not in that house. So I go in the house just to clear it for my own peace of mind, and I can't find the kid. And we're walking out, and I see this door that is closed. And I said, hey, did you search that door? He goes, no, it's a closet. A kid's not going to go in a closet and close the door. So I go over, and I open the door, and this baby screams. The kid had walked into that house, closed it, went into the closet, turned around and closed the door, and was locked himself in that closet. And that kid would have died in there because everybody had searched that house, and he would have died of dehydration exposure. So I picked the kid up, and I'm kind of shocked. And this other deputy, who was more on the ball as far as his career, I guess, he takes the kid from me, and he goes running out of the house saying, look what I found him.
What a dickhead.
I know. People don't realize that there's every kind of person as a deputy. That
Sure.
They're humans.
Yeah.
So you deal with the people on the street, or sometimes they're just like the people that you're working with.
Shut up, Putnam. Call the newspaper. I found the baby.
And I didn't correct them because that's not what I was in the job for.
Yeah, right.
I didn't do that. Yeah. Another time I pulled a paraplegic out of the canal. That canal that runs through Phelan?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
The paraplegic was drowning in the canal. So those were some there's a lot of those kind of situations, but I forget most. I just remember the violent, fun ones more than I do.
How do you get the canal? Those weren't as blocked off as I thought they would be. Like when I lived out there.
They're wide open.
Yeah, they were accessible.
To everybody. In fact, they would close them down for maintenance once a year and drop the water level, and we'd find all kinds of stolen cars in there because the crooks would steal the cars, joyride in them, and then run them right into the canal.
Gross. That's like an aquifer, right?
Yeah, it's from up north. It's water from up north, the Sacramento, I think.
Is there fish in it and stuff?
What?
Is there fish in it and stuff?
Yeah, there's fish in it. Yeah, there's fish in it. People fish in there.
So people know it's like a concrete river. It's just like a perfectly symmetrical concrete.
Very steep sides.
Yeah.
And if you get below the water level, the sides are very slick. So if you fall in, you can't climb out. You have to swim, stay above water to the next ladder and grab that ladder. But there are a couple of siphon points where the water goes underground. And if you hit those, you're done. You can't.
Sounds terrifying to me. I don't like that at all. So what's the advice, David? How do you survive? You just try to float to the next ladder?
Yeah, well, as it turns out, this is kind of a longer story. I left LA because I got hurt pretty bad, and I didn't think they treated me the way they should have. And maybe I was burnt out. So in any case, I dislocated my shoulder on the job. Most painful thing I ever went through. So every now and then, well, I find out later after this that the rib head and my back was permanently popped out, and scar tissue growing around it. So anytime I made a fast move or a certain kind of move, that rib head would pop out of that scar tissue and it would shoot spasm up and down my back. Oof. So I got a call, and this was back when this was 84, when there was 26 deputies up in the desert for the whole desert. And so when I got there, they'd get a call, for instance, like on Monday. Somebody would come home from work on Monday and find their house burglarized. We wouldn't get to the call until Friday midnight because we were that far behind on paper calls for service. Wow. So people were irate at the deputies. The deputies were all stressed out. I get there after working South Central. My best night, I did 6 code 3 runs back to back, code 3 calls. You're throwing people in the back of your car, stuffing them in because you go, there's no time to go in and book them. So I get there, and the deputies are stressed out because they're behind 5 days on paper. I said, this is not stress. It's actually kind of slow. So this call was 245. It's over the deadly weapon that was 4 hours old. And it should have been, that's how far we were behind on that day. So I pull up, and there's this big burly fireman in his fireman T-shirt, and he's got a big hematoma on his forehead, and blood is running down his face, and it was dried, and his T-shirt was dried. And I said, what happened? And he said, my son, I can't handle him anymore. He hit me with a rock. And I said, what do you want to do? I said, I'll do whatever you want me to do. And he says, yeah, take him. I can't handle him. I said, okay, well, just so you know, I'm not going to let him do that to me. You understand? If he goes off on me, I'm going to do what I have to do. He goes, yeah, I understand. So I go in, and I go in the front door, and this kid is sitting on the couch. He jumps up, and he takes off running. And I said, hey, come here. And it's a big kid. He's over 6 foot. No, he's just right at 6 foot. So he comes toward me, and he changes his footing. I see it coming. He pulls back to swing on me. He's going to swing on me. And so I hit him in the shoulder, swing him around. I put him in a chokehold, and I choke him and handcuff him. And I got him in the back seat. He's a juvenile, so I take him down the hill to juvenile hall, and it threw my back out. My back is spasming. So, it is hurting bad. So I'm going to stop at the station. There's a chiropractor because it's a temporary station. Sperry just incorporated, and it was a strip center. And there was a chiropractor right next to the sheriff's station. Donut shop, chiropractor, sheriff's station.
Perfect.
So I pull in the back of the station because I'm going to take him inside, put him in holding, run and get my back cracked. But as I pull in the station, there's this person waving, hey, there's a paraplegic drowning in the canal. So I got a crook in the backseat of my car in custody. My back is out, spasming, and I'm stuck. I got to go. So I tell dispatch, I said, I just been flagged down. I'm rolling code 3 to the canal, the aqueduct. And I pull up, and there's an overturned a wheelchair, and there's a guy in the canal bobbing down the canal. So I tell dispatch, I said, I need code 3 assistance. Get somebody here. And I go running down the side of the canal. It's a steep bank. And I run up to the guy. I have my PR-24 out. I said, here, swim over here and grab my baton. I'll pull you out. And he yells, no, I want to die. I want to kill myself. Oh. So now it's just really up the problem.
Yeah.
It changed the problem level, the technical level of the situation. So my back is hurting. I am in excruciating pain. And I said, I'm getting ready. If he doesn't do what I say, I'm going to climb up the top, take my Sam Brown off, take my boots off, and go in after him. So I yell at him. I said, if I had to come in after you, you're going to wish you were dead because I am going to beat the living hell out of you. So,
a little motivation.
Yeah. He comes over, grabs a baton, and another deputy gets there just as I got him on the baton, and we're moving down, but I'm holding him. I get him to hold one place, And another deputy runs up and grabs on the back of my Sam Brown and leans into it. And just as he does that, the newspaper people had caught the call, and they got a picture of me pulling a paraplegic out of the canal with my PR-24.
Nice.
Even though he was suicide.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that makes up for the baby.
What?
It makes up for the lost credit on the baby.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great.
So I would never talk to the press, and because they would take things out of context every time and get me in trouble.
No, not the press. They don't do that.
Yeah. So they said, we want you to give a statement. Oh no, it was a TV station. It was a local TV station. We want you to no, it was a press. I want you to tell us what happened. And so this guy's name was Robert something or other. And so I'm telling a story, and I said, and I said, when I pulled up, he's bobbing down the canal, right? So in the article, it says, Robert so-and-so was seen bobbing down the canal. It was funnier, I guess, when you had to be there.
I like it.
But another time when San Bernardino City was in Forbes, or one of the big magazines, as the 10th most in the top 10 most violent cities in the United States, they called us in to work at the sheriff's department. They consider us big brother, and they just let us go. I didn't want to do it at first, but that town was wide open because they had no proactive policing.
Yeah, that city's still terrible.
The crooks were wall to wall. And I would pull up my cop car across the driveway on the sidewalk, and it was at Wall Street and Baseline. And I would just stand in uniform in a black and white. And I'd say, I got a courtesy warrant checkpoint. People walking down the sidewalk. And I'd line them up, and I was running for warrants. So I was arresting, I'm not kidding, I would arrest 15, 18 people a night for guns. I got a rape in progress. I got a 2-4 shooting at a avid drilling in progress. So all these people, highway patrol, probation, other deputies, I was carrying probably a fifth of the stat load, and there's 50 people because I was arresting so many people.
Jeez.
So highway patrol comes to me after one briefing, and he said, hey, how are you doing this? All your arrests are at one location. What do you get after briefing? You get with some detectives and you go out and you arrest all these people? I said, no, I just do a courtesy warrant checkpoint. Look at me like I'm crazy. So because it was so active, Real Stories of Highway Patrol, remember the TV show?
I've heard of that, yeah.
So they wanted to put a camera in the back of my cop car and follow me around. I said, no, I'm not Highway Patrol. I'm a deputy sheriff. I'm not doing that. So because the Highway Patrolman says, you need to follow that guy around, because I was getting all these in progress. I was getting in all kinds of trouble. So I said, no, I'm not doing it. So I pull out with my partner, and I'm driving, and I look in my rearview mirror, and the Highway Patrol car is following me with the Real Stories. They're gonna Blue Angel me all night,
whether you like it or not.
Whether I like it or not. So I pull this car over. It's out of state plate. I get a gun. I handcuff the guy. This hooker's walking by. I said, hey, can I talk to you? She comes over. She's under the influence of heroin. I take her, put her in the back of my car. She's giving me the name game. I said, I'm not, I can't book you till I get your real name. She goes, okay, go to this house. So Highway Patrol, they out there with the camera filming me, and I have everyone, is that all you're going to do? I said, yeah, I'm going to go book these guys. So they leave, and I see them get in their car, and they pull a drunk driver over right there. They pull across the intersection. They pull a drunk driver over. I get in the car with the hooker, the guy with the gun, and we drive down this long. We pull out in the street, go up not half a block. It was a big apartment complex. It was a long distance up. Pull down this long driveway, and as I turn into the parking area of this apartment complex, there people are throwing their meth down, their syringes, and so I jump out with my gun, get everybody put down on the ground, and I'm handcuffing everybody, running handcuffs. And I'm deciding who I'm going to take, because now I got 2 people in the car and I got 6 people detained, right? So I'm deciding who's the worst crooks, who gets cut loose. And as I'm deciding that, and my partner's standing back, watching my back, making sure we don't get sniped, this brand new 4Runner with a camper shell comes pulling in, and the crook is wearing one of those bandanas, a Hispanic guy, and there's two of them in the car. They don't fit the car, and they got the old shit look. So I pull my gun, and I run up on him. Don't move, show me your hands. And as I get up on him, I look in the back, and they had just, the citizen had just went to an ATM, and these guys had grabbed him and had him duct taped in the back of this 4Runner.
What?
They were going to take him out to the desert and kill him. And it was his 4Runner, right? So I yelled at my partner, oh, shit, we got a problem. Because now we got two guys, the gun guy in the back of my car, the hooker. We got 5 or 6 people sitting on the curb. And now I'm holding my gun on two very
nuts.
bad guys.
Yeah.
So I called for help. I said, and I never called for help. I rarely, if ever, call for help. And so I put out a call. I said, I need code 3 assistance. And the other guy said, when Dave calls for help, you know it's going to be a party. So they all start coming, hauling ass. And the closest guy was the highway patrolman that had pulled that drunk over. And when I gave my location, I didn't know the address. So the helicopter came over and put a spotlight on us. And I could see the highway patrolman. He comes up over the fence and he sees me. So he jumps in his car, comes around, and we pull the guys out. We hold the guys, we prone the guys out and cut the victim loose. And he comes over and he grabs onto me. Thank you. They're going to kill me. I'm trying to get them off. Hold it. We're busy. We're trying to get these crooks. They got guns. We're trying to get them in custody. But I couldn't get them off of me. So we get everything settled. So now we have two kidnap, robbery, attempted murder suspects, the gun guy, the hooker, and 5 guys. So it was a jackpot. So the highway patrolman comes up to me and said, how did you do that? You were just across the street. You drove across the street, down this driveway. Yeah, it was fun.
Like a magnet.
Yeah.
That's crazy, David. That's awesome. Hey, one of our more popular questions is for young recruits getting into police work. A lot of people listen to the show and they're on the fence if they want to do it or not. They like the stories, they're not sure. And we also have people in Police Academy I get messages from. What would someone with all your experience, what would you say to somebody who's getting into police work now?
Oof.
Besides, don't do it.
No, it's you know what, when I started, Miranda was people were still complaining about Miranda decision, even though Miranda was in 1963 or 65. People were still complaining, we can't arrest crooks because you got to tell them not to talk to you. And I said, yeah, but I don't care about that. The game just changed. It changed around them. It changed around me. So these new guys coming in, they don't know what it was like back when I was working it. So I can't tell them not to do it. It's still the funnest job I ever had. And I would do it again. If they gave me a chance, I'd still be doing it if I wasn't old and slow. So if I was telling somebody, I would say, learn how to write and then also learn how to speak Spanish.
Yeah.
You want to get ahead in the job. You got to be able to write your administrative paper and speak Spanish. That's the way of the future. Yeah,
absolutely. I hear that a bunch from guys. David, where can we find your books and your other writings? Is that you have a website?
Yeah, it's David at davidputnambooks.com. Oh, that's my email. Excuse me. What's my David Putnam Books.
All right.
DavidPutnamBooks.com.
DavidPutnamBooks.com. And the link, ladies and gentlemen, will be right in the show notes. It will be on the website. So you don't have to remember it. They'll just be able to click it right there. What are the big plans? I mean, you're writing all these books. What about, you're awfully close to Hollywood. You ever try to sell a script or anything like that?
As it turns out, Sinister got a star review in Publishers Weekly, which is really difficult to do.
That's awesome.
It's a smoking hot book. And word got out, and some person with influence in Hollywood got a hold of it because of the star review and some other factors. And they packaged it all up, and they did a little video on it, and they sent it to Denzel Washington to look at.
Really?
But yeah, we just got rejected like 2 weeks ago, so it's not happening.
Well, that's Hollywood. You could get rejected 50 times for it took, you know.
Yeah, and I tell everybody it would be interesting, but I write novels. I like to tell stories. So even though that would be fun, I'm going to be writing my books.
Yeah, and
I have two I have 2 series going now: the Bruno Johnson series and the Dave Beckett, the Bone Detective series. And the first book and the new one just came out October 18th.
Awesome, and we'll link that in the show notes for sure. David Putnam, thank you so much for coming on the show, sir. It was an honor. You got stories for days. I feel like you're a guy that could come back on with more. You have more stories. I can tell.
I have lots of stories.
Yeah. Well, if I can talk you into it, I'd love to have you back on down the road if you're up for it.
Anytime. Happy to do it. Anytime you got a lull, I'll fill in.
Awesome, sir. Thank you so much. I'm gonna close the do the outro. Jeez Louise. Have I done this before? I'm going to do the outro. I'm going to throw you in the green room. Can you hang on for a second? I'll just chat with you afterwards.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the great David Putnam. Holy cow. That guy's got some stories that are absolutely insane. It was such an honor to have him on. Definitely going to have him back on. He's going to keep writing books. He's going to want to keep talking about the book, so I know he's going to come on and talk about them here and give us some more of those sweet stories. Guys, before we go, I have to thank the Patreon sergeants, the people that keep the lights on over here, my one and onlys, my loves. I'm talking about the great Tom Connell, Dennis, no last name on that one, just Dennis, Andrew Proctor, Luke Ervig, Zip, I'm going to just say Zip, because that's what you have for a name. Zip 2001, you know who you are, sir. I see you at church. Daniel from Motocrop Chronicles, Elian Rogers, Andrew Horton, Greg Gadboy, Ben Peters, Rick McCormick, Scott Minkler, Parker Brower, the great Tammy Walsh, Sean Clifford, Braden Walker, Sasha McNabb, Corey Payne, the great Mike Wynn, Nathan Gowan, Jason Lau, Dylan Pyrosic, the great Sarah Pomeroy, Lauren Stimson, Alex Wazik, Brandon Hooker, Jake Pinedo, John Shoemaker, James Rose, Seth Wright, Tony Fahey, William James Long, that's Deputy William James Long to you, Andy Biggs, Chris June, Adam Mihal, the great Gary Steiner, and Lane Campbell. Whew, baby, I might have to split that up, guys. I might have to do that in 2 parts, or maybe half one episode, half the next. It's a great problem to have. And like I always say, if you really love the show and you want to show your support, Patreon is the place to go. If you can't